We ball off this Friday edition of the SportsMax Zone with cricket for the first time ever. West Indies will have separate head coaches for the senior men's teams, and the region's governing body, Cricket West Indies, announced the two men who will serve in those positions. Interim head coach Andre Coley remains as the red ball coach. Coley accompanied the Caribbean men on their tour of Southern Africa in February, winning one test and drawing the other. Coley's first assignment will be at home when India travel to the Caribbean in July. Former West Indies captain and two-time T20 World Cup winner Darren Sammy has been given the nod for the white ball coaching job. Sammy has coached a CPL franchise, St. Lucia Kings, taking them to the final of the 2021 edition. He will be the first coach on the job as the Windies gear up for a three-match ODI series in Sharjah against the United Arab Emirates before heading to Zimbabwe for the ICC Cricket World Cup qualifiers. Yeah, big news today. Cricket West Indies Chief Executive Officer Johnny Grave joins us via Zoom. Johnny, good afternoon and welcome to the show. First of all, how are you doing? I hope we find you well after a few months of what I suspect would have been intense interviews and discussions and negotiations.
Yeah, look, we're well, thank you, and delighted that we've been able to finally make the appointment of the replacements to a permanent head coach when Phil Simmons obviously resigned and stepped down at the end of the last year. So delighted that we've got two head coaches in place with the time to plan and prepare for what is, ultimately two almost baptisms of fire for both head coaches. Darren's going to have to go to the World Cup qualifiers in Zimbabwe, and Andre Coley may well be facing the World Test champions in a first Test series when we host India in July. So they'll be straight into the thick of it, but it's great that we've been able to make the appointments today.
What would have given these two men the nod for the respective jobs?
I think in the case of Andre Coley, everyone's been impressed with the work that he's done in the academy. We've seen the players really develop under a 12-month comprehensive programme that's been running here at Coolidge Cricket Ground in Antigua under his leadership. And then he took on the interim role at the start of this year in the two tours to Southern Africa, starting with win against Zimbabwe and finishing on a T20 International Series win against South Africa. And the feedback from the players and the other coaches and the Director of Cricket, Jimmy Adams, who was out there in South Africa, was positive. And he came through the interview process. It was a global search. We had candidates from all over the world apply, and Andre and Darren were the lead candidates for both roles.
Yeah, talk to me a little bit more about Darren Sammy, because I see already where his experience as a coach, some would say he has limited experience as a coach, but also his coaching qualifications would have come into question. First of all, can you detail for us his qualifications for this role?
Yeah, look, his qualifications really come from his experience as a cricketer and from his head coach experience that he's had for a number of years, particularly in the T20 format with his leadership as head coach of the St. Lucia Zooks and now Kings, and Peshawar in the Pakistan Super League. So he's got experience both home and away as a head coach of those franchise competitions and has had some success, and clearly on the field, unparalleled white ball success, being the two-time World Cup winner and captain for the West Indies in 2012 and 2016. So he's very committed to this new sort of post-career in coaching. He's wanting to work with our coach and development department that we now have here at Cricket West Indies to get his certificates in coaching and make that progression from a personal development perspective. And obviously one of the advantages of splitting the role between the two different formats is Darren will have the time to spend some time here in Antigua working with our coach development department to get those certificates and to give him the tools and help him with developing as what we hope will be someone who can contribute on the field and off the field for many years to come.
Yeah, the directors, would it have been an overwhelming vote for both Andre Coley and Darren Sammy? If you can, take us through that process.
Yeah, it's a similar process that we've now run for a number of years. So we've advertised the roles, and again, on a global basis, there was no restriction in terms of who could apply. They went through a shortlisting program and then an interview process. The interview panel was made up of obviously the director of cricket, who the head coach will report into, along with our HR officials, the manager and chair of the committee, along with the cricket committee chair and the president himself. So it was a fairly long interview process. Darren and Andre were the lead candidates that were presented to the board yesterday evening at the board meeting on one of the agenda items, and the board endorsed the recommendation from the panel, and so we agreed contractual terms this morning and made the announcement late morning.
Yeah. How close did Shivnarayan Chandapal get?
I think it's fair to say he's probably the runner-up in one of the roles, and again is obviously a coach that's come through our level 3 certification process over the last few years. He's worked for us. He's also done some work, as we know, for the Tallowers and for the US under-19 women's team. So he's gaining experience, and Shiv's credentials as a player and now developing as a coach are well known to us, and we're certainly looking to engage him and other former players who have those desire to be a coach and a leader within our system to get involved and support us.
Yeah. Was there any international candidate who would have, one, gotten on the short list and would have been seriously considered in the closing stages of negotiations?
I think there were a number of international candidates on the shortlist, and to make the shortlist, you've got to be a serious candidate. We only shortlisted a total of 6 applicants. So, there were, as I said, there were candidates from the region and candidates from international. There was no requirement for the role to be necessarily a West Indian. Clearly, being from the West Indies and knowing our culture and our players, it is an advantage. And, Darren and Andre have come through that process and endorsed and supported by the board and announced and confirmed today.
Right, and of course, earlier today in the press release coming out, Andrew Coley, in his statement, he spoke about making a positive contribution and, of course, working closely with Darren Sammy. Is that something that we are to expect both coaches, sharing information despite being involved in different formats and, of course, working for the better of West Indies cricket?
Absolutely. I think it's crucial that they have a good working relationship. There will be times where we have to say through the medical advice that certain players will have to be rested from certain formats, and obviously there needs to be that understanding of what the strategic priority is. Clearly, as you can imagine, over the next month, the priority is very much the ODI World Cup qualifiers in Zimbabwe. But that obviously means that Andre can be here with the test-only players preparing for India and planning for that series. So instantly there's an advantage in terms of the way that we've structured that role. Or the 2 roles, should I say. But really important, there's really good communication between the 2 coaches. And I think we've got 2 really strong candidates who have the skills and the attributes that both sort of teams, in inverted commas, really need at this stage.
Johnny, and for some time, of course, a lot of discussion about us losing our Windies players, for some reason or the other. Of course, we see players step up. Of course, they light up the West Indies scene, and then you don't hear about them. There are always excuses and whatnot. Do you think these 2 gentlemen that have been selected will help us, get our players back together and, of course, just have that unity that we would want to see from them, which will be translated into results on the field, which is what we want?
Yeah, look, I think with Andre, obviously his pedigree, having worked pretty much every level in the coaching system over the last decade or so, is a huge advantage. He knows or has worked with all the players. Clearly, with the additional duties that he has and the priority that we placed on A-team cricket, having a real red ball focus, I think the fact that he's been with the academy, he'll be the head coach for our A-team series from July onwards, and he'll have that test focus in his role. I think the test match coaching role is more of a technical coaching role probably than the white ball coach, and I think that we're looking to progress obviously younger players through that, and therefore his work with the academy, the A-team and into the test arena will help with that player relationship, because hopefully players that he's spent a lot of time and invested in developing, he can see them all the way through to wearing a maroon test cap. I think in the case of Darren, I think what the white ball team needs is that player relationship. You've got to understand the demands that are placed on these white ball cricketers and the opportunities that exist for them. You've got to build that trust and relationship. And I think Darren has that as one of his key attributes. And he's definitely a leader, a motivator, and I don't think anyone can question his strategic acumen when it comes to white ball cricket in both formats. So, look, I think they bring different things to the role, but certainly our relationship with players continues to be a big focus for us as an organisation because of all the challenges and changes in cricket. We're going to have to continue to adapt and deal with cases on almost an individual basis.
Yeah, personally, I have loved what Andre Coley has done with the Windies Academy. Of course, they won the recent competition and all that. So now that he's gone, I know we are to expect a coach to replace him. How soon, how much longer do we have to wait to find out who that person is?
Well, again, partly because Rayon Griffiths is going to lead the A team to Bangladesh. It allows Andre to continue as the academy head coach, and he's going to do that pretty much up until mid-June, where he'll flip to become the Test match head coach, and we're going to have a preparation camp here in Antigua prior to the India series at the back end of June. So really at that point, the academy will do some long arm preparation ahead of the CPL and through the emerging players program we have with the Caribbean Premier League. We expect all the academy players to be part of that. So really we've got a bit of time, probably end of September, early October, ahead of the Super 50. When the academy will really come back together as a group. So timing-wise, it probably gives us a bit of time to, again, assess the situation and find the right person to take over the role of Andre Coley as the men's academy head coach. And as we've said before, we're launching the women's academy in July of this year. So we're also looking for a coach to lead the women's academy, and that will be based alongside the men here in Antigua on a 12-month programme.
Yeah, okay, Johnny, you just labelled the immediate task of coaches Sammy and Coley as a baptism of fire. So having said that, goal setting, what would be the objectives in the immediate future and even longer than that? Would that be something you've discussed already with the two gentlemen?
We've certainly started those discussions. I wouldn't say we've completely dotted every I and crossed every T, but clearly the short-term objectives for Darren are very, very clear. We've got a World Cup that we must qualify for. We managed to do it when we unfortunately had to qualify back in 2018 for the 2019 Cricket World Cup. We know it's going to be enormously challenging. There's some very, very good teams, including Sri Lanka, the host themselves, Zimbabwe, Ireland, and other teams like Scotland who have done well in one-day internationals. So, we know it's going to be a tall order, but we absolutely must qualify for the World Cup. And then obviously we know this time next year we've got the honour to host the men's T20 World Cup in the region. And so that has an extra importance, being a T20 World Cup where we're hosts. So there's some fairly obvious on-the-field metrics. But again, we know that we're 9th and 8th in the world, so we know we've got work to do to make some progress in our white ball cricket. And Darren's not a magician. It's not going to happen overnight. So hopefully the metrics will be a combination of clearly performance-based, but also in terms of, as Mariah said, we're looking to develop some player relations and develop some of those players and develop a style of cricket that suits us as a team, and one that we can really sort of adopt throughout the system with how we approach our white ball cricket. And that's something I know Darren's very keen and very focused on.
Yeah, Johnny, when Phil Simmons resigned back in October, to be frank, it was the white ball results that were really disastrous. Over the past 2 or 3 years, we've seen strides with the test setup and the group of players in test cricket that Phil Simmons had gotten some fairly good results with them. How much is Andre Coley embracing this red ball landscape that he has now under his grasp? Because when he had got the interim job initially and we had spoken to him, I know because of his background with the players, having been with them for so long, it is something that he's excited about.
Yeah, look, he is. And I think the way in which, unfortunately, our test series happened to be in the World Test Championship, he's not necessarily going to be, going from series to series to series. There are going to be breaks and some long breaks between our test series where we're hoping to arrange 18 cricket where they continue to work with some of the younger players and 1 or 2 of the most experienced players in terms of those single format players. But also it's going to give him the opportunity to travel around the region and work with players in their home countries and developing their technical skills, being really, really clear on their weaknesses and what we need to do to be successful. And again, hopefully we're going to create a culture where, again, Andre can still at times come and add value to the academy players and look to that future generation. So we're not trying to label and pigeonhole our coaches too much, and we want to certainly, as we're building their assistant coaches, have that flexibility where different assistants can move between the different teams and spend some time here working on the next generation at the academies.
Yeah, and I must say that given what world cricket is at the moment, I quite like the idea of having separate coaches for the white ball and the red ball team. How much is the West Indies, or Cricket West Indies setup and the entire fraternity embracing this decision to have two separate coaches?
Yeah, look, we've seen other nations do it, and I think when we first really discussed it at length, some of us weren't necessarily convinced. I think I've always thought it's the way forward. You know, the player relations side, the player communication, the developing relationships. When you've got a pool of 45 players and you're going from series to series to series, it's almost impossible to review and plan series to series, let alone have the time to really build and develop those relationships, particularly around the white ball players who come in 1 or 2 days before a series. You literally play back-to-back games and then they leave, and quite a lot of the time they're playing or operating in a different time zone. So I think the more that we've spent time planning and looking at this, I think everyone's convinced that it's the right way to go. And I think now, on the back of Andre and Darren getting the roles, I think everyone's really excited that we found candidates that really want the jobs, understand why we structured them this way, understand the challenges that we face, and are absolutely committed to try and reversing our fortunes on the field.
Yeah, for sure. Johnny, we're fast running out of time. Two quick ones. One, can you give us the total number of applicants for the respective jobs, and can you give us the names of the final 6?
We were over 20 applicants in total. I think we shortlisted 8 in totality if you include some duplicate candidates that applied for both roles. But on the basis that some of them are still engaged in employment and we didn't get their permission necessarily to make their names public, it wouldn't be appropriate for me to name any candidates. But we certainly were happy with the standard and the calibre of candidates that we interviewed. All 6 of them could have done the job, and as I said earlier, delighted that Andre and Darren came through the process, because I do think we've got the right coaches at the right time, and I think we've set them up in terms of structure for success. So hopefully we can see improvements, and as I said before, they're not magicians, so we're not necessarily going to reverse the fortunes immediately, but I think we're all really hopeful that they can do what we need to do in terms of moving our way back up the rankings and improving as white ball and test match teams.
Yeah, another issue quickly, IPL franchises gearing up to offer year-long contracts to players. We have already heard about one approach, Jofra Archer, the England fast bowler. How much do you know about this issue, and how concerned should we be as cricket fans in the Caribbean?
Yeah, look, I don't think it's speculation at this stage. I'm certainly not aware of any approaches to any of our players, either contracted or uncontracted players. Look, I think we saw this coming many, many years ago and have lobbied hard at ICC level to put regulations in place and new regulations around how those T20 leagues operate. It's a fantastic opportunity for our players to go and earn life-changing amounts of money and improve as cricketers as playing alongside different players and in different conditions. I think the real threat to international cricket is not year-round contracts. I think the one thing that we're always conscious of is that players at international level are only contracted on a 12-month basis to a board. And we know that sport, and particularly cricket, is a very uncertain career. So I think the real threat is that these franchises will be able to, through their financial resources, give players certainty and give them 3 or 4 or 5 year contracts like we see in football. And therefore, I think then that becomes a very, very attractive option for players, because certainty of income is something that no real international cricketer has, on the basis they're always at the mercy of form or fitness and the selectors' acts. So, look, it's something we're going to have to deal with. I think the world is continuing to evolve and change very quickly, and the cricketing landscape is changing very quickly. And as I said earlier, it's up to us to navigate it and to try and be as flexible and find these compromises as we look to achieve our objectives, as well as understanding, that players now have choice.
Yeah, thank you very much, Johnny. Great as usual, always candid. Thank you very much for joining us on the SportsMax Zone today, and for sure we'll be chatting again soon.
Thank you very much indeed.
All right, Johnny Grave, CEO of Cricket West Indies. More cricket to come on the SportsMax Zone. The Indian Premier League, the Mumbai Indians with victory today. Surya Kumar Yadav with a fabulous century leading them to that win. More after the break.